Okay, welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, James Fauntleroy. So good to see all of you here on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon. The Jaybefaunt channel is available on all major podcast platforms, like all the other ones that you can find on your podcasting platform sources. So go ahead and subscribe to me there. Also part of the Revolutionary Blackout Network, so you can find me on there on Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays typically. So go ahead and subscribe also to Revolutionary Blackout Network as well. Now, just to give you guys all a thumbs up, if you got a heads up, really, if you guys would like to, you guys can go to my Substack to get email notifications. You guys can go to jaybefaunt.substack.com so you guys are fully aware of whenever I go live, upload clips, or do articles, so you guys can go there. So thank you very, very much. Also, thank you to all the people who are watching this day from YouTube, Twitch, Rumble, Rockfin, and Twitter and Facebook. So good to see all of you here today. Now, just to give a shout out and a hello to everybody who's watching at this very moment. Good to see Miguel coming in saying peace to you. Good to see you, Miguel. Sweary Fairy, the bestie of bestie, says, I feel like RFK's run is one of two things: a vanity project or planted distraction. Ooh, good one. Let's talk about that. We'll get into that. Good to see Extra Booyah. Uncle Warren is also in the chat saying, live long and prosper. All right. Good to see you also in the chat. Now, what are the things that we're going to be talking about today? There's a couple of things that we're going to be getting in today. First, oh, wait. That got in twice? That wasn't supposed to go in twice. Let me delete that. Okay. So, our primary story is going to be dropping the dims. This is going to be something that I need to reconcile with, and I'm going to tell y'all why. This is going to be something where I'm going to have to make an admission. JB is going to have to make an admission. All right. Then we have another one. Frosted Flake. Oh, say it ain't so. Say it ain't so. I will not go. Turn the lights off. Carry me home. I cannot wait to talk about this because this is going to be really interesting, especially in regards to student loan debt. And our first story, funeral home. We're going to be talking about funerals. We're going to be talking about death, but not in a sad, somber way, but we're going to be talking about it in a way of exploitation. So let's get into that. Funerals. Now, one of the things that I actually have experienced in a bit of a way was a few months ago, my grandmother passed. And in doing so, you dive into the weeds of caring for the remains of a loved one when they die. It's something that a lot of people do not want to have to deal with. It is a very complex and convoluted system. And you're already dealing with that, with the trauma, as well as dealing with the mourning that you have to deal with in regards to death. When you lose a loved one, you want to honor their memory the best way you can. We do this through funerals. But one thing many aren't talking about is how death is big business. Now, I saw this video on TikTok, and there's a funeral director that is actually talking about this, and I want to give my thoughts throughout this, especially about the profit motive of death. So, if you guys will allow me, let me share my screen really quick, because this really hit, and I think a lot of people need to talk about this, especially within your sound mind at this present time, especially with your families. So,
but I do want to take this opportunity.
Oh, let me start off from right at the beginning. Come on.
To spread.
Oh, stop. Okay. All right, there we go.
The title of this video is Funeral Hustle. Spread some education amongst my people, and I'm going to forewarn you that the information I'm going to share with you can be disturbing to some. It can be angering to some. It may be hard to stomach, but we're going to talk about it because a place where people waste a lot of money is on funerals. I don't ever really jump when people holler funeral. And the reason for that is I spent a significant part of my life working as a family service counselor in a funeral home. I have seen every aspect of the funeral business. I know it like the back of my hand. Okay, from scraping up your brains off the street, putting them in a bag, taking you to the coroner. Once the coroner give me the call, I can come pick you up. I come pick you up, clean you up, call my man in to embalm you. I dress you up, put you in a casket, service to the cemetery we go, burial, covered, flowers, hug your mama. That was my job. Now, let me tell you something. I was trained specifically to find out how much money you had to spend and to spend it all for you because I collected a 30% commission. So if you had $20,000 funeral policy, insurance policy, it was my job to try to get you to spend $20,000.
Did you hear what this man just said? 30% commission on funeral sales. Say what? 30% commission? Let me ask you something. Does something sound wrong about that? Does it make you feel a little icky that they're making 30% commission? They're making a commission at all on funeral sales? Huh. That don't sound right to me. 30% commission. Doesn't it sound isn't that unsettling? It gets deeper. Let's continue.
Okay. So if they taught me to do this, then I'm thinking they taught everybody to do the shit. Now, I had a hard time with this after I had made some money because I say, man, this lady's husband just died, and I just spent $15,000 on his funeral, and she can't pay her mortgage next month. See, because that's what insurance is for, to help the surviving members keep on going after that family member is gone. Now, with GoFundMe, that's different because that's not insurance. That's asking for help. But the bottom line to this situation is, y'all, funerals are a waste of money.
Let's talk about that point too. Because when we talk about insurance, I made a video on TikTok earlier this morning because a young woman was talking about how auto insurance, in her view, is also a scam. Life insurance is also a scam in the way that where your basic material conditions and needs were met, the necessity for life insurance would actually become null and void. What do I mean? So if you had housing guaranteed, healthcare guaranteed, food guaranteed, education guaranteed, transportation guaranteed, if you were to have all these things in the way that people like myself believe, then the necessity of life insurance becomes less and less and less. Therefore, making it really just a waste of money because these life insurance companies do so for profit. You have funeral companies that will see that, oh, this is how much you got for end of life expenses. All right, we're going to absorb all that, even though that end of life is to take care of the person after they die. They want you to spend all that money on just mourning the person who died. When in reality, it's supposed to be for the person so that they have healthcare, housing, food, water, transportation, daily expenses for their life. But that's not how it goes, because the profit motive exists in end of life expenses. This is the dark underbelly of the funeral system. Boy, let's continue.
Hear me and hear me well. First thing is an airtight casket. I put people in the ground. A year later, the family's moving to another state. They want to take that family member with them. I make it a point to tell them they cannot be present when we exhume the body. The reason for that is because that airtight casket that I sold you wasn't really airtight. And it's actually filled with water at this point. And your loved one is in there floating around in water, deceased as can be. Okay? Do we still jury? No. The jury will be in there floating too, or if it done came off the bones. But it gets real fucked up underground. And I'm in Las Vegas, Nevada. We barely get any rain. So if caskets are filled with water in Nevada, then imagine how much water they got in Georgia or New Orleans. I'm telling you, funerals are a waste of money. Dead is dead. And you can do a decent homegoing if you know what you're doing and you're not dealing with shady people for $5,000 or less, depending on how are taught to take advantage of your emotions with a very, very plain look on our face. Something like this. Yes, ma'am. I understand. It's going to be.
Yo! I went to my grandmother's memorial, right? A few months ago. Yes. Yeah. Very, very sorry for your loss. Oh my gosh, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 5 songs and 3 sermons later, my auntie get the bill. Was that all necessary? See, that's the thing that a lot of people don't want to talk about. And here's the thing, especially among Black people and religious people, oh, it's big business. Huge business. Especially when you get them 3-hour long, 4-hour long sermons and ceremonies. And then the church want to charge you for using their facilities just to be able to perform a funeral. It makes you feel dirty. It makes you feel dirty just thinking about it. It's just, nah, man. And you're in an emotional state. Let me ask you this. How many times have people said that it's best not to make big decisions when emotional. And yet, these funeral homes and businesses will take advantage of you in making a major financial decision when you're in an emotional state. And you may charge it to your credit card. Or you may end up going to debt, say to start a payment plan. Payment plan? For mourning your dead loved one? Payment plan? Something's wrong, baby. Something's wrong. All right, continue, brother.
Okay. I did this every goddamn day. I didn't care if it was your baby or your grandmama. My job was to get paid. So understand this when you're dealing with funeral home people, okay? It's about that money. It's about that money. It's about that money. And these people collect 30% commissions off of your emotions. I was very good at this. I didn't care who it was, who died, what. I had to get paid. It's a very cold-hearted man's hustle. You know what I'm saying? So just understand when somebody get to hollering and screaming about a funeral, tell them, don't spend all that goddamn money to put in a hole in the ground. And I'm done. You do what you want.
Now, if any of you have family in your life, I think this is a conversation that you all need to have while you are in your right faculties right now. And I don't care how old you are. You need to have this discussion. You got a spouse? Talk about it now. You got family members? You got nieces, nephews, brothers, cousins, grandbabies, grandmamas, anybody, especially if they're in your right faculties, talk about this right now while you are in your right mind. Make the decisions and plan right now, because in this capitalist system, they will exploit you out the wazoo. I'm trying to curse less. They will exploit you out the wazoo just because you're in an emotional state. 30% commission? Y'all got me effed up. If you think that I'm going to let you bury me with 30% commission. No, I'm taking that 30% with me. Put it in the ground with me. Because no, you are not. No. These people got their goddamn minds. And the crazy part about it is, that what this gentleman is saying is true, because there are billions of dollars in funerals, billions in the funeral industry. That beautiful casket ain't going to matter when they're in the ground. Who gives a crap if they're in a beautiful casket? Put me in a pine box and bury my ass. Do not sit there and try to make a funeral for me all pretty and no. Put a picture of my goofy mug up there so that everybody can laugh, right? Give some flowers to my mama and my boyfriend. Hug them, say you're sorry, and keep it moving. Wrap me in cheesecloth, put me in a pine box, and bury me somewhere. Or roast my ass, take my ashes, and dump them in the Atlantic. I don't care. But what you're not going to do is you're not going to be exploited because of my passing. I refuse. No. I'm giving this to the capitalist system one last time. When I go, I'm doing this to the capitalist system. Like, nah, baby. That ain't happening with me. You ain't going to exploit my mama. You ain't exploiting my boyfriend. No. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of these factoids here, because this is crazy. A lot of times people get exploited so much. So this is out of U.S. funeral industry today. How much does the U.S. funeral industry worth? Hang on. Let me enlarge this so you guys can see real good. It says the U.S. funeral market is currently estimated to be worth around $20 billion annually, with 2.4 million funerals taking place each year. Due to the increase in U.S. senior population in the coming years, this death rate is set to rise. I know this is going to, be kind of unsettling to people, but the boomer population is a very large population. And the boomer population is in their mid to late 70s down to their late 50s. Late 50s to mid 70s. And they're getting old now. And because of that big of a population, the funeral industry is licking their chops. Like, all right, we got more people that's going to die. That means more money for us to make. Do not allow yourself to be exploited. Do not allow your family to be exploited by this industry. Capitalism is such a vicious system that it will make as much money off of you when you're grieving as possible. Can you imagine? You have a death of a child, and then you have to go through this process? Can you imagine the death of a spouse? Having to go through this process? And people will sit there and go, well, how do you honor your loved ones? You can honor your loved ones, but you don't have to spend an arm and a leg to do it. And that shouldn't be. Why do we accept this? In my opinion, this is just wrong. It's wrong. As we can see, capitalism affects us even in death. Corporations will try to make profit off of us even when we die. When a loved one dies, you're already dealing with a lot of tragedy and trauma. So being exploited is something that is dirty and wrong. Here's my opinion. Death services are another thing that shouldn't be for profit and should be publicly funded. I said death services should not be for profit and should be publicly funded. You should not have to pay to be born, and you should not have to pay to die or to be remembered. So, in the meantime, until we actually change the system to a more egalitarian, equal, and equitable system, here are some tips that I would like to share with you guys. So, let me see. So, this talks about low cost or free services funeral. Says looking for low cost or even free cremation service. Says direct cremation or donating a body to science. Says when it comes to dealing with a deceased person, there are various options available, each with its own costs and considerations. Two of the least expensive methods are direct cremation and body donation programs. It is important to note that not everyone may qualify for body donation. For this reason, we recommend contacting a local funeral home cremation provider first. Many providers can assist you about local body donation programs where you live. It says direct cremation involves the immediate cremation of the deceased without any funeral or viewing services. This is typically the most affordable option, with prices starting at $795, so about $800. Direct cremation is less expensive than traditional burial or other funeral options. The most primarily covers the cremation process, transportation, and basic services provided by the funeral home or crematory. Direct cremation offers a straightforward and simple process, and the deceased ashes are usually returned to the family within a week or two. Then you have body donation programs. So this basically is talking about donating your body to science, but there are different caveats. Like for instance, body mass index being a factor as well. So that's also another variable. So just be sure to about that. It says direct cremation or free cremation with body donation. It says first and foremost, the importance to ensure that what we define is meant by the offer of free or no cost cremation with a donation. If your loved one is accepted for a donation by a national anatomical donation company, they do ordinarily cover all costs, including collection and transportation of the deceased to a facility, the cremation post-donation, and the return of the cremated remains by mail. Local universities or medical schools that offer anatomical donation programs may not cover all costs associated with the body donation. For example, they can require that the family use the services of a funeral home to transport the deceased to the university's facility for a donation. A funeral home will charge a transportation fee for this service. Sometimes there is a small charge for processing the necessarily legal documents, such as death certificates and transit permits. Secondly, body donation is often a supply and demand sector, meaning that acceptance of donors at the time of passing can be affected by capacity levels at institutions in the state or region. The volume of recent donations and local training and research needs can determine this. No anatomical donation company or university will guarantee acceptance onto a program at the time of death, even if donor has pre-registered. Thirdly, you must consider the circumstances of the health and weight of the deceased and the condition of the body at the time of death. As mentioned, some pre-existing health conditions exclude individuals from donation, and certainly weight is a factor. Obesity and a high body mass index are most likely to exclude an individual from a body donation program. So, it says direct cremation may be your best or a low-cost option, as a donation is not guaranteed acceptance at the time of death. It is usually recommended to have a plan B. In other words, do not just rely on opting for body donation, but have identified with a disposition plan if there's a donation, if the donation is declined. So basically a contingency plan just in case. This is where knowing how to find low-cost direct cremation can be vital. The benefits of opting for a direct cremation also means that surviving family remains in control of the cremation process and will have the cremated remains back within 1 to 2 weeks, along with death certificates, etc. So any estate closure or memorialization can be undertaken in a swifter time frame than is likely with the body donation. So it says, considering that a direct cremation can generally be conducted between $795 and $1,195 in many areas, this is the most affordable disposition of choice for families needing to manage costs. So this says, what is a no-cost cremation? Although most funeral homes will not mention this, getting a cremation for free is possible. Donating the body in science for research is one way of getting a cremation for no cost. Several national anatomical donation companies typically use the term no-cost cremation. The body is used for research by the medical profession, and then the body is then cremated and the ashes are returned to the family with no costs incurred. Acceptance of whole body donation can depend upon the logistics of the place of death and the transfer to a suitable institution and the donor's health history. Therefore, you should have an alternative option prepared in the event of donation is not accepted. So then this talks about financial assistance for cremation expenses. And so this basically talks about that. Now, I'm going to share this link in the chat because anybody and everybody, you should have these conversations with loved ones now, because this is very important, because they will exploit you at the time of your death. And a lot of times people and your loved ones, they'll go, well, we have to honor the legacy and we have to honor the memory of our loved one. And sometimes they want to go all out, but you need to have this conversation to say, these are my last wishes. This is what I want. And I do not want you guys to be exploited in this way. Especially if you have a life insurance policy on yourself, then you don't want all that money being used on your funeral expenses. You don't want your loved ones to be exploited for the money that you left them so that they can survive in this system. So this is an important conversation for many to have. I think this is, is necessary. A lot of times people do not talk about capitalism in regards to things like funerals. We don't, because it's something that we don't think about until it actually happens. We talk about capitalism in regards to birth, but what about death? I think that's something that we really need to talk about. So I'm going to be going to the chat really quick. Reality Revolution coming in the chat saying capitalism is a scam. Always has been. Yep, I've been saying that for 10 damn years. Remember that in Independence Day? Thanks, Reality Revolution. Roger Meadows, thank you so much for this super chat. Says, this is exactly why Dad told us cremation, and we did. This is why I told my family, cremate me. Cremate, have a service in a park somewhere, blow up my goofy picture. You know, if y'all want to do some flowers, do some flowers. Take my ashes, go 45 minutes to Daytona Beach, put my ashes in the Atlantic. All right, bye. Bye. You're not gonna, y'all not exploiting my loved ones. No. Thank you so very much for that. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. I'm thugging it. Hang on. He just said, I don't think those who work at electronics get that high a commission. No, I did not get that high of a commission, even when I was working in sales, man. Yeah, 30% is insane. Like, what? Whatever man says, nobody's going to see the casket. Mm-mm. Reality Revolution says coffins are horrible for the environment too. Cremation or no box replenishes the earth. Yeah, because your body can actually provide nutrients to the soil. Yeah, it's true. Let me see. Let's see, Jacqueline says, when I go, I want the cheapest funeral possible. Spending thousands on what is essentially waste disposal is obscene. Yeah. Mm-mm-mm. Hen's Teeth said, before he died, my great uncle left money to pay for the entire family to share a meal at a restaurant. Oh, wow. That's sweet. I would do that. Like, go to a restaurant and just, be with each other and, talk about all the goofy stuff that I said and did. Laugh. That's what I would recommend to my family. All right. So we're going to be moving on to the next story. But before I do, please make sure to like the stream. And thank you so very much. All right. Now, we're going to get into our next story. Frosted Flake. This is... I'm sorry because I'm laughing at the thumbnail that I made. I can't believe I made that. But I did good. JB did good. So, Maxwell Alejandro-Frost. He flaked on a lot of student borrowers. Flaked. And he's getting a lot of heat for it. So it's not looking good for him. So let me just go to this because I think this is important. All right. Let me share my screen. Oh boy. Maxwell. All right, people. This is Maxwell Alejandro-Frost. Now, this congressperson is this is my district. He recently flaked on student loan debt. Let's take a look. This is from The Debt Collective. It says Maxwell Alejandro-Frost voted to restart your student loan repayments. Fight back. Fill out student debt release tool to demand Biden cancel your student loan debt today. So they have him here, right? Cheesing for the whole world to see. Now, as far as a lot of people are concerned when it comes to the student loan debt issue, there's a lot of people, especially on the left, that think that the cancellation of student loan debt is a big issue because you have a lot of people who are educated that have went through higher education and they've had to go into debt in order to receive that higher education, and now they feels like they're being punished because the debts are greater than the loan that they took out to go to school. So I just want to share, first of all, the response by what Representative Frost said, because he responded to this tweet. Yes, he responded. And let me share this with you guys. He says, responded to this in July. Guess because this tweet did good numbers, they wanted to tweet it again. What's disappointing is that I am one of the few members calling for full cancellation. More info here. And he goes to a that he made back in July. He said, I'm fighting for debt relief. Just this morning, I testified to the Department of Education having want the payments to unpause, but the Republicans held Congress hostage with the threat of our country defaulting on payments from Social Security, Medicare, and many other important programs. The payments on pausing in September were part of the deal cut. I hate that we had the deal in the first place, but decided to vote for it in the end to avoid the default. Multiple things can be true at the same time. We have a real opposition in this fight, and I wouldn't count myself as part of that. I appreciate the question. And this is in response to them saying that Representative Maxwell-Frost voted to unpause your student loan payments, right? So, as far as Maxwell-Frost saying that, well, the student loan payments that were supposed to unpause, they basically said it's either that or we stop the government shutdown. Now, let me ask you, does that sound like an excuse, or is that a valid reason to you? To be honest, the whole debt ceiling issue is a farce because the debt ceiling is just political theater, in my opinion. It's just an approval to spend more. So let me share this with you guys, because this is why I love the independent left media, because they actually will call things out and show how some of these things are really just a farce, right? So let me share this. All right, so let's share the screen. All right. So this is from Second Thought. And the title is Why the Government Has Infinite Money. Interesting, right? So let me see. 136. So 130. And we'll start here. Let's go. Wait, let me enlarge.
Spending, which is a very familiar theme in American politics. With the 2024 election season starting, like every cycle, one of the things you'll inevitably hear is the "how are you going to pay for that?" question. Like with the debt ceiling stuff, this question will never come up for defense spending, obviously. That money is special and totally different and unrelated, and stop worrying about it. We've got hospitals to bomb, come on now. But over the next 14 or so months, every single progressive candidate proposing universal health care will, without fail, get scrutinized for their budgeting. Despite the fact it's estimated that universal health care would save Americans $450 billion a year, and, less importantly, tens of thousands of lives. But none of that matters. What matters is if it would create a budget deficit. More money going out than money coming in taxes, and therefore more debt. And this sucks. This selective scrutiny for progressive spending, I mean. It creates doubt in a lot of people's minds about the viability of good projects like free healthcare. And this doubt rarely ever gets resolved by the truth. The truth being that the government can absolutely afford these programs. More than afford. The government has a long list of good reasons to spend money like this, and almost no reason not to, as you'll see throughout this video. These questions about government spending create a lot of doubt, though, and keep us from embracing progressive policies we believe in, including me for a while. Social programs like free healthcare always sounded good to me, but they also sounded expensive. And for a long time, constantly being told that the government's spending so much already that the debt is in trillions of dollars made me believe we actively needed to give up on stuff like free healthcare and scale back our spending. And in short, no, we don't. And in long, that's what the rest of the video is for. What I'd like to explain today is that government spending isn't a bad thing. There's no debt your kids will have to pay back, nor is it reckless spending by well-intentioned but ultimately kinda careless bureaucrats. We can afford to pay for social programs like universal healthcare, and welfare, and new infrastructure, and high-speed rail, and sustainable energy, because government spending is A, not funded by taxes, so more government spending doesn't mean less money in your pocket, and B, there is no hard limit on government spending so long as the government spends money on something. The real
So let's talk about this. So if student loan debt is forgiven, then let's think about with this premise how if we forgive it, it won't hurt the government, but it will benefit borrowers. Think about all the extra money that would get spent in the economy if they didn't have to return this money back to the government. Just think about it. See, the debt ceiling is a manufactured issue to give us the facade of scarcity, to make us think that we can't do the things we need for the people, but we can do all the yummy things for corporations. We can fund war in insane amounts, but we dare not cancel student loan debt for millions of Americans because we need to gatekeep education. How much student debt were we talking? 1.77 trillion. That's how much student debt there is. If canceling that debt harms the government, then what about when the government dumped $4 trillion in stimulus in 2020? Come on, you guys know. Remember, wait, put in your thinking caps. Let's go back, right? Let's go back to the future. Let's go back to March of 2020 when the government said, "Oh, we gotta add some stability to the markets. So what we're going to do is we're going to take $4 trillion and we're going to dump it into the markets to shore things up." See, we got to tickle the balls of corporations. That's basically what they were doing. Sorry, I hate to get crude here, but that's basically what they wanted to do. So let's share, because tweets are forever. By the way, that video from Second Thought is pretty based, and I recommend that you guys get that video of complete watch through. Actually, let me share that in the chat just so you guys can so you guys have access to it, so you guys can watch it after mine. YouTube. Okay. So let me share this, because everybody was talking about this back in 2020. It's only 3 years ago. V's Numerous said, breaking: Congress to pass bill Monday allowing the Federal Reserve to issue $4 trillion in liquidity for pandemic relief. I had to be careful. 12, 18, 24 zeros. 4 followed by 24 zeros to be printed. Whoa. Remember Blossom? Where Joey used to say, whoa. That's basically what happened. $4 trillion. $4 trillion. That's $4,000 billion. And yet, are we in some type of horrid state right now? country-wise as far as the government saying, oh my God, we're broke? Is the government broke in some way for creating that $4 trillion and then dumping it into the markets for stimulus? Has the House, the Senate, and the Federal Reserve suddenly burned down in some way, shape, or form? No, they're still there. And yet, we can't cancel 1.7 trillion. Let's give or take $1.8 trillion in student loan debt. We can't cancel. Can't do that. You see, this is really a false choice in my. We have to raise the debt ceiling, or we have to pay. We have to continue to pause on student loan debt repayments. We can do both, actually. We don't really need to raise the debt ceiling. It's just an arbitrary number that we agree. And it really isn't the debt. It's just the amount of money that the U.S. government actually puts into circulation. That's all it really is. See, here's the thing. Because you literally make the money. That's like me taking this pen, putting it on some paper and saying, this is JB's money. And then I can pay you to do whatever the hell I want with that piece of paper that I printed on. All right, I want you to do this job for me. And then I will give you some of these, and if you do this job for me. And so there's this scarcity. It's like, oh my God, we're going to be in debt. And our kids are going to be in debt for 1,000 years if we spend this much more. But in reality, how can you be in debt when you're the one that creates the money? Because people are like, oh, well, we can just, tax the government. Tax the rich people more. Number one, the people who have all this money is through exploitation, so therefore they don't deserve to have that money because that money is stolen, especially from surplus labor. So tax, when it comes to making it so that we don't really need to increase taxes at all, we just need to increase spending so that the people have all the services that they need. And we can actually reallocate some of those funds, especially from the military budget, because the military budget is overly bloated, but nobody really wants to talk about it because they are held hostage by the military industrial complex. It's true. It's true. Right? Let's get into this. Let's share. Let's go further. Did I? Yes, I did. Okay. Let me share this article with you guys. A lot of people seem to have short-term memories regarding things like this, about what the government can and can't do. It's like the government does it right in your face of what it can and can't do, but then they will manipulate and go, well, we can't do that. You just did. Look, Congress has already approved $4 trillion in pandemic relief. Here's what happened to it. This was back in February of 2021. Oh, I don't know if I can play that. But it says Congress has authorized nearly $4 trillion in spending over the past year to help address the economic crisis caused by the pandemic. But only about $3 trillion of it has been spent. Roughly a third of that money went directly to struggling families through stimulus checks, expanded unemployment payments, and food stamps. That leaves about $1 trillion that hasn't been dispersed yet, even as President Joe Biden is calling Congress to approve another $1.9 trillion in pandemic relief package. Administration officials say the risk of doing little is far greater than the risk of going too big, while Republican lawmakers, and at least one well-known Democratic economist, Larry Summers, are concerned about the price tag of Biden's plan. A group of 10 GOP senators have proposed a $618 billion package, which would narrow the number of people eligible for stimulus payments and provide less school funding than the Biden plan because, well, they are cappies that just want people to suffer because they didn't exploit people like other people did. It says much of the $1 trillion previously authorized but as yet unspent funds are scheduled to be used over time, and only a smart portion will never be spent. According to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, a fiscal watchdog group tracking the spending. So here it hasn't yet gone out the door, about $500 billion left from March of 2020. So basically, the money's there. And you really don't need to go, well, we don't have the money to be able to cancel it. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Y'all just don't want to. And it's not like you're forcing some company, It's like you guys are the federal government. These federal-backed student loans can literally be canceled. Student debt cancellation could be a stimulus for millions of borrowers to ease the economy. Resuming this debt will bring even more pain to workers and will make things worse for us. So let's go back to this other tweet, because I think this is also another salient point that we should also focus in on, because a lot of times people just automatically think, well, if you give this money to people, then it's going to harm us. No, it's not. U.S. government's pandemic aid to total $6 trillion, including $2 trillion from Congress and $4 trillion from the Federal Reserve. So that's from Josh Kaplan. So that just goes to show and solidify my point that the money is there. If they wanted to cancel it, they can cancel it. They can cancel it completely, but they don't want to. And I'll get into why that they don't want to in a second. Here's a question, though. Why isn't Congressman Frost calling out Biden for not canceling student loan debt via the education secretary? And why isn't he calling out the farce that is the debt ceiling? That's my question. Because he could, but he won't. So let's go here. Because, if I were him, that's the first thing I would do. Is I say this is all a political ploy. This is all a game. But people like him. Oh my God. This thing automatically starts playing. Okay. Let's roll that beautiful beam footage, baby. All right, so this is from More Perfect Union. Great channel. I recommend that you guys subscribe to them. They do great work. Let's go. It says how Biden can cancel your student debt. Let's go.
I'm going to talk about one simple question. Is it legal for President Biden to cancel student debt? The answer is yes. He can do it today without any other action by Congress. Let me explain why. Imagine you lend me $20. It's your $20. You can ask me to pay it back in full, in half, or not at all. Student debt cancellation works the same way. When someone takes out a federal student loan, they're borrowing money from the government. And the Constitution gives Congress the authority to control property of the government, such as debts owed to it. When Congress gave the Secretary of Education the authority to make or back student loans, it also gave the Secretary the broad and unrestricted power to cancel or write down that debt. This power was established under the Higher Education Act in 1965. That law gives the Secretary of Education the authority to compromise, waive, or release any right, title, claim, lien, or demand, however acquired. The Secretary also has the authority not simply to compromise debt, but to modify a student loan to zero. Secretary Betsy DeVos actually used this authority to cancel out a limited amount of student debt. Now, it's important to understand the purpose of the Higher Education Act. It was to make the benefits of higher education widely available, especially to those who otherwise couldn't afford it. Nobody else but the federal government was willing to lend to people with no credit history, no means, and only the chance at a bright future. But we decided to do it because education is so, but the intent was not what we're seeing now, worsening the racial wealth gap, driving up costs, reducing affordability and access, and triggering a repayment crisis. The nation today has a $1.7 trillion student debt burden owed to the federal government by about 43 million Americans. At the Project on Predatory Student Lending, we represent over 1 million student borrowers who were cheated by for-profit colleges. And this is an industry that aggressively targets and scams people who are looking for jobs and careers in order to get its hands on federal student loan dollars. Their priority is enrollment, not education. We see how defaulting on student debt can cause poor credit, food insecurity, homelessness, inability to pay household debt, barriers to employment, and mental and physical health issues.
So you see that this is more than just, oh, well, they borrowed money, so they should be able to pay it back, blah, 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 blah. This is literally causing issues regarding health, housing, food, all types of different securities that we need in order to survive. Because those of you who are Gen X and millennials, right? What were we told way back in the day? I'm talking about 20 years ago, right? Remember the movie Accepted with Justin Long? What did his father in the movie say? He said, if you want a good life, you go to college. We all were told that. We were told if we want to have a good life, if we want to be a productive member of society, you had to go to college and by any means necessary, even if you have to go into debt. Because if you go into debt, then you'll make enough money and you can pay it off easy because you'll be making more money. See? Now look at the rest of us. Because, by the way, I didn't go to college. Why? Because I saw my own mama go into student loan debt, and she went to college back in the 60s. In the 70s. She was college. Early 70s, she was in college. And she still has student loan debt. And her student loan debt was like $1,500. Right? Now you have people who are my contemporaries that are sitting there with $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 in student loan debt they can never pay off. So we were told as a generation that if you want a better life, you better go to college, even if it means going into student loan debt. And we did. And now we're becoming more screwed over than ever. And now you got some people getting mad at us for wanting some relief because we were taken advantage of. You took advantage of some 17, 18, and 19-year-olds by making them sign documents, putting them into extreme debt. It's crazy. Because some people are like, oh no, 16-year-olds can't vote even if they work because, well, 16-year-old can't think. And yet you guys are sitting here putting 17, 18, and 19-year-olds in $100,000 in student loan debt. So the math ain't math in here. It's not. So this is the system. And then people were like, well, you signed a contract. Yeah, they signed a contract. But guess what? Anybody remember Little Mermaid, right? Why was Ursula so bad? Why was she the bad one? Why do people see her as evil? Because she took advantage of a young girl and had her sign a contract without her daddy present. And that contract costed her her voice. Right? Remember that? And even when her daddy tried to rip up the contract, he used his trident to shoot it down. It was null and void. Couldn't do it. And guess what? Her daddy ended up having to pay for it too. Right? But why did we look at Ursula? Because Ariel signed a contract, right? But why was Ursula so demonized? Because she was a loan shark. She manipulated Ariel. You see, when you look at these student loan and student debt companies, you have to look at them the same way. They're loan sharks. So why are we making excuses for loan sharks? It doesn't make sense to do that. It's usury. That's what it is. Extreme usury.
It holds people back in their decisions to get married, have children, or to do certain kinds of jobs that we as a country need doing. And this burden impacts the whole family, the whole community, the whole economy, not just the loan bearer. But we've also seen how debt cancellation can liberate Americans and their families. And with the COVID-19 pandemic, the government has paused federal student loan payments through September 2021. This has freed up households in this pandemic to spend money and help keep our economy going. And the ability to do that falls under the same authority to modify or outright cancel debts. In these examples and others, the law is clear. President Biden has legal authority to cancel student debt. And doing so is not an end, but a beginning of necessary change we need to invest in higher education in a different way, so that millions more Americans are not cheated out of their futures and saddled with student debt that they can never repay.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to people like Representative Maxwell Frost, he's playing with a rigged system and basically saying, I'm sorry, I had to choose between helping out student debt borrowers or people with Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid recipients. That's really a false choice that they want you to think. We should be cutting the military budget and using those funds to help workers instead of accepting a false premise that the Democratic Party forces on us. Let me share this with you guys too. Did I? No. Because I think this is something that a lot of people really need to think about in regards to this whole premise that it's either or. Now, I'm going to be kind of censoring my language because we're on YouTube, but you guys know exactly what I mean. As the pandemic spreads, polls show nearly 60% in the United States believe political system designed solely to serve rich and powerful. So this survey was taken as Congress debated a $4.5 trillion corporate bailout amid the pandemic. New polling out Wednesday backdrop in the continuing of pandemic outbreak shows that the most of the country believes the U.S. political system works only for the wealthy and elite rather than for working people. In a survey of 1,002 Americans taken by the Hill Harris X, 57% of respondents said that they believe the political system serves the interests of the wealthy and powerful versus 32% who said it still works for all Americans. Low-income Americans were more likely than people well off financially to say the system works for wealthy insiders, 61% to 55%. Women were 12% more likely than men, and Democrat and independent voters were more likely than Republicans to say U.S. government is designed to serve the elites. Republicans were the only subgroup in which a majority of respondents said the system works for everyone. The poll, which had a margin of 3.1 percentage points, was taken between March 22nd and 23rd as lawmakers debated a relief package amid the pandemic. I got to censor my language. The package contained $4.5 trillion slush fund for the powerful corporations while providing a one-time payment of $1,200. Remember that, guys? For a portion of working Americans and an expansion of some unemployment benefits. President Donald Trump signed the legislation to package days later. The bill also includes billions of dollars in loans for major corporations like Boeing, while demanding little to no meaningful oversight by Congress of the Treasury Department's distribution of the funds. Earlier in March, the Democrat-led House pushed through the Family's First Coronavirus Response Act, which included paid sick leave only for companies with fewer than 500 employees, leaving out workers at some of the wealthiest employers in the country. Medicare for All proponents in March noted that single-payer healthcare system could have protected millions of Americans from losing their health coverage as businesses laid off and furloughed employees as the disease spread. As Common Dreams reported, former Vice President Joe Biden, the Democratic presidential primary frontrunner, insisted Medicare for All would not have improved outcomes for Americans as the virus spread across the country. He is full of shit. Politico on Tuesday published an article describing how the pandemic as an equalizer, forcing wealthy and low-income Americans to struggle alongside one another amid medical supply and pandemic test shortages. But while the virus itself does not discriminate according to wealth, critics on social media said the U.S. political system has placed low-income workers and other marginalized people at greater risk of danger. Actually, the pandemic is showing how unequal our society is. That was from law professor Dorothy Roberts. It also puts people of color, poor, low income, disabled, incarcerated, unhoused, and undocumented people at greater risk. So when it comes to the money that we actually have, they rather give it to corporations or in a means so that we the corporations don't fall, right? They really give it to you so that you can give it back to corporations so that they don't default. That's really what's going on. Here's the point. When it comes to relief for student debt borrowers or making sure that we have social safety nets, we can do both. Provide student debt relief, keep and expand social safety nets for people in this country. However, the corporate dictators have a fear. If we were to cancel all student debt, that would raise the question of why we can't have tuition-free public colleges, universities, and vocational schools. That's a little too close to communism for them. TLDR, we actually can't afford it. They just don't want you to have it. All right, go ahead and give the stream a like. Thank you so very much. And if you have not already, I just want to give a big thank you to all of the patrons on Patreon and Coffee, as well as members and anybody that sends me any type of mutual aid via PayPal. So just to let you guys know, if you guys would like to, you guys can also become patrons on Patreon and Coffee. So thank you to all the members. I got to update that list, but thank you so very much. I also want to give a huge shout out and thank you for new patrons. We have Jane Simpson and Tracy J. Galvin. Thank you so very much for becoming patrons as well. And if you also would like to support the channel, then you can also become a patron on Patreon, and I will share with you guys the tiers as well. And it's just a few. You have JB members, Solidarity, Comrade, Jaybefaunters, Super Jaybefaunters, Super Duper Jaybefaunters, and Mega Jaybefaunters. So thank you so very much to all who supported the channel. So thank you. Now I'm going to go to the chat because we need to talk about this. Because, yeah. Jacqueline says, why can't they just do this like in the old days when they just wrap you in a blanket, bird you? Oh, that was from the last segment. But yes, thank you. Why can't they just do that? They could do that. Jenna, you know I can't read this. Jenna. Oh gosh. I like you, Jenna. Let's continue. All right. Screen Arts Media, good to see you. Screen Arts Media says change comes from the bottom. Wealthy will never ever change. Only when they are in fear will change take place. Gallows outside their windows create change, nothing else. Well, yeah. Holistic Radical says in biblical times, not that I'm into that, there was a thing called Jubilee where all debts were forgiven every 7 years. Yes, there was actually debt Jubilee, and usury was actually banned. I think was one scripture in the Mosaic Law that says you must not charge interest to your brother. So if he borrows, he pays it back exactly the amount that he borrowed. A lot of people don't talk about that. Yep. Actually, charging interest is actually a kind of an unchristian thing to do, but a lot of them don't want to talk about that. All righty. Okay. So let me check The Rock to make sure. All right. We got some comments on The Rock before we get into our primary story. Solid like a rock. All right. Let's share the screen. Roger's coming hot. Sorry. Thanks for the tip, Roger. He said, part of the problem is the language we choose to use. We let the right choose a language and we adopt. Stop saying spending. That's their word. Instead, say invest. Instead, say investment. Thank you, Roger. I need to say that. Where one sounds irresponsible, like teenage white girl in Beverly Hills just aimlessly spending money on shit she don't need. Hello, clueless. Ass F. It says the other says you're getting something back. That is true because the government actually invests whenever it puts out money, especially towards social safety nets. Thank you for the next tip. He says, while we're at it, let's also stop saying how the economy is doing and instead point out whether or not the income inequality gap narrowed, widened, or not changed since we last checked. Very good point, Roger. Very. Next tip. Thank you so much. Brainstorm. What about if we establish partnerships with colleges in other countries to give us a paycheck to be American college recruiters, setting us up in high schools for their graduates to convince them why they should study abroad for free? Ooh! Oh, them fighting words with the corporations, especially with these corporate colleges, Roger. You're about to make some enemies out here, y'all. But I like the idea. You know I'll do. All right. Competition, right? All right. So we're going to get into the next story here. Our primary story for today. Oh, Lord, this one. Oh, boy. JV is going to have to eat some humble pie here. Dropping the dims. What in the hell is going on here? What the hell is going on between the sheets in my home? I can't believe this. Baby, wait, let me explain before you start to put your cane. Oh, I'm about to have a fit. Oh, it's about to be some shit. How did I get into this? Should have named came home with this. Sorry. Going into my R. Kelly in the closet back in the day. You know what I'm saying? Yo, some of y'all know this song. Some of y'all were singing it with me right when I was saying it. So the Independent. Hang on. Let me make sure I get this up. Because come on now. I was wrong. I was wrong. I admit it. I was wrong. And some people were right. I was wrong. Right? I'm saying it publicly right now for all y'all to hear so that people can't come back and say, well, JB, you never admitted you were wrong about this. Yes, here I am. And I'm humble and man enough to admit that I was wrong. Here's what I thought. I thought that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was going to continuously run in the Democratic Party, and he was going to run up until Super Tuesday and then drop out and endorse Joe Biden, then go on his book tour. That's what I thought. But I was wrong. I didn't think he would actually pull the trigger. I didn't think he had it in him. But apparently he did. Now, I will fully commit to me being wrong on October 9th. What's October 9th? Well, if he makes it to that day and formally announces his independent run and leaves the Democratic Party, I was wrong. So, let's get into it, folks, because this is crazy. Baby, it's crazy. Baby, it's crazy. All right. This came out of Meaty. 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 Says exclusive. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. planning to announce independent run? Oh, Lord. What in the hell? 2024 presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. plans to announce he will run as an independent on October 9th in Pennsylvania, media has learned. Kennedy's campaign machine is now planning attack ads against the Democratic National Committee in order to pave the way for his announcement in Philadelphia about running as an independent, according to a text reviewed by Mediaite. Bobby feels that the DNC is changing the rules to exclude his candidacy, so an independent run is the only way to go, a Kennedy campaign insider told Mediaite. Interesting. Kennedy, a notorious, here's what it says, a notorious anti-vaccine conspiracy theorist, challenging incumbent President Joe Biden for the Democratic nomination, has been flirting with the third-party run in recent weeks. The New York Times reported last week that he met with the chair of the Libertarian Party, raising the prospect of a departure from the party that decades ago became synonymous with his family name. Kennedy remains far behind Biden in the polls, yet while the Times reported Democrats worried that the third-party run by Mr. Kennedy could draw votes away from Mr. Biden and help elect former President Donald J. Trump, it is unclear whether such a run would hurt the current president more than a Republican nominee. Indeed, the polls show that Republicans have a far more favorable view of Kennedy than Democrats, as the National Review's Jim Garrity pointed out in July when a survey asked New Hampshire Democrats to describe Kennedy in one word. The top responses were crazy, dangerous, insane, conspiracy, and unknown. Conservative media has been far more supportive of Kennedy's campaign as well. Fox News host Greg Gutfeld proposed that the political scion run as a third party in July. Quote, I think he should run as a third party candidate because I do think he would win. Because his party's radical elements, what we call woke, have embraced this fascist clampdown on language, Gutfeld said. Greg Gutfeld wouldn't know woke if it woke him up. But that's just my opinion. But, yeah. That's the Mediaite article that everybody's been talking about, right? So, I want to share this as well. Oop, wrong one. So Robert Kennedy Jr. Is actually telling people to save the date. Kind of like a marriage, a wedding invitation. Save the date. That's the big day. So let's go. Oh my goodness. I'm registered at Williams-Sonoma. Sorry. I'm so stupid. But let's go. He says, let's save the date. Let's see. Registered at Williams-Sonoma.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to be in Philadelphia on October 9th to make a major announcement. I'll tell you right now exactly what that announcement will be. I can say, though, that if you've been waiting to come to one of my public events, this will be the one to come to. I'll be speaking about a sea change in American politics and what your part and my part is in that change. A lot of Americans who had previously given up any hope that real change would ever come through the American electoral process have begun to find new hope in my candidacy. And I understand the deeply felt concern that people have about the way corruption has overtaken our government. It's in the executive branch, it's in Congress, it's in the leadership of both political parties. And so some people feel a kind of cynicism alongside the hope because they've been disappointed so many times. I want to tell you now what I've come to understand after 6 months of campaigning. There is a path to victory. The hope we are feeling isn't some kind of trick of the mind. We all recognize that there's a genuine ability of national transformation, and its source is the good, kind, brave, and caring. That goodness is stronger than the divisions that are keeping us all apart. I see it every day on the campaign trail, and the more I see it, the more I trust it. And the more I trust it, the more the path to victory becomes visible. So how are we going to win against the established Washington interests? It's not through playing the game by the corrupt rules that the corrupt powers and the vested interests have rigged to keep us all in their thrall. Instead, we're going to have to rewrite the assumptions and change the habits of American politics. We're going to tap into a mighty surge of people power to reclaim an honest, peaceful, just, and prosperous America. So I am inviting you to join me in Philadelphia on October 9th. There I'll share with you our path to the White House and how we can all participate in healing our nation.
Whew. Okay. So, look, here's my thoughts. If Kennedy is to actually legitimately make a fight for White House, he needs to leave the party if he has any chance against fighting against Biden. I mean, just from a political analyst standpoint. I mean, the Democrats literally canceled the primaries with no debates and changing the orders of the primary states. So it's like I literally thought that he was just going to capitulate to the Democrats and not actually go outside, but he did. But now corporate media is like, wait, this is happening? Oh God. This is what the corporate media is going, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. They're like, no. Watch this space. Because the corporate media they're not happy. Because they were cool with him being a Democrat. They were cool with him moving within the Democratic Party and, just avoiding him. But now this is actually putting more eyes on Kennedy, in my opinion. So let's go take a look at this. Shout out to Case Study QB, always doing the damn thing. Follow Case Study QB if you have not already. It says, Mediaite reporting on RFK Jr. will run as an independent. Quote, this unfair effort to prevent a dynamic race among Democrats is harming the support of Joe Biden. It will be better to defeat your opponent. It's fair and square. So let's get into it.
Mediaite, by the way, is reporting that RFK Jr. is planning to announce he's going to run as an independent, and he's going to make that announcement October 9th in Pennsylvania. Byron, how might this affect the race going forward? Is it good for someone like Trump, bad for Biden, or could there be some other contingency developed?
By the way, if you guys have not, please make sure to take the poll as well at the top of the chat. There's a poll being taken regarding this question. So take your poll, and then, or if you guys want to wait until I'm done, right before I show the poll, then you guys can go ahead and vote there. But just letting you guys know there is a poll regarding the question of will RFK damage the Democratic Party, Republican Party, both or neither. So.
Well, I think the Democratic Party had been pretty effective in shutting down any challenges to President Biden and making sure there's acknowledgement that there's a contest going on in the Democratic Party. And indeed, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has never surged. He's never hit above 20%. A lot of times he's down around 4 who don't want to vote for Joe Biden. It would seem to me that if he announced an independent run, that could be very damaging because there are those Democrats. We know they're there. They don't want Joe Biden. Maybe they're not focused exactly on who they want, but any credible choice, they would.
on the question of RFK Jr., then you got Cornel West, who is still out there. He's driving them absolutely nuts because he's just like, look, I represent the real liberal progressive wing of this party. You guys are kind of half-baked on that in that category. Might he still be a problem for this Biden re-election bid?
Well, first, let me say that Byron York is correct. The chickens have come home to roost. This unfair effort to prevent a dynamic race among Democrats is harming the support of Joe Biden. It would be better to defeat your opponents fair and square. Now, when you talk about third-party candidates, you start to see people that are just going to peel off. Right. The polling numbers show this election is really close. Every 1% of voters on the left that go with someone other than Joe Biden cripple his opportunities. Look at the prediction polls where people are betting. For the first time in this election cycle, we're seeing something that we didn't see last time. And that is, at no point did the prediction betting polls show that Trump was likely to prevail in 2020. They're already showing that Trump is likely to. The entrance of other third-party candidates is likely to exacerbate that phenomenon.
So it feels kind of like a blowback, right? It feels like this is an unintended consequence of basically canceling the primary, for canceling the debates, for moving the primary order of states just so that it benefits Biden. That's what Biden has basically brought on himself. So instead of hushing the voices, and what they intended was for Biden just to swim into his second term, because he's been such a disaster, then you have people like Marianne Williamson and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. running a Democratic primary, but then the gatekeeper said, no, you cannot come in. You will not have any debates, and we will not allow you to be able to be advantageous in the primary states, in the early states of the primary. And so because of that, then now you have people who are speaking out against it, like a Marianne Williamson, but nobody really hears her that well. But RFK Jr. has been speaking a little bit more, and he's been getting more of the vocalized critiques of the Democratic Party. But now, if you look at it, he's like, well, all right, nuclear option. I'm going third party. So now this is getting more attention. And so some of the people who said that they would not support RFK Jr. because he's running as a Democrat are now giving him a second look. And it's not looking good for Biden, because the people who said vote blue no matter who, some of them are going vote who. But this is also making the rounds as far as corporate media. A lot of people are talking about this, and I think it's very important that this is considered, because ultimately, when you look at the threat that RFK Jr. has towards the Democratic Party, like it's because RFK Jr. is running independent. Instead of going to a primary, now he can go all the way to the general. So it's no longer a primary fight. This is now a general election fight. Let's go.
Lonnie, I want to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who was running against President Biden in the Democratic Party primary. He is now considering running as an independent.
Yeah.
What do you Do you think that that actually affect, and would he hurt Biden or might he hurt Trump?
Well, we're more likely to have probably a 3 or 4 way race than we are to having a non-Trump candidate as the Republican nominee. If you look at whether it's Robert be another
Possibly Jim
ballot.
Manchin, we don't know.
Yeah, and I mean that's a more likely scenario, and we can debate sort of who they take share from. But if you've got Robert F. Kennedy and you've got a candidate that center right,
Oh, yeah, Cornel West also.
then it's interesting, and then it becomes an interesting dynamic.
So I've looked at data around this, and on the one hand, you would assume actually that RFK, because he's doing really poorly in Democratic primary polls, would maybe actually pull more populist kind of message. But the data that I've seen suggests he kind of pulls equally from both sides. Really benefit one side or the
All
other.
right, thanks one and all.
So what do you guys think? Do you think that he would be damaging to the Democrats more than the Republicans, or more Republicans than the Democrats? Because it feels like he would be damaging to kind of equally, because he has pull from equal sides, especially people who the pandemic is a major issue for them. It feels like he's going to be equally pulling, because there's a lot of people who are Republicans that say, well, you know what? I actually like RFK Jr. So that's a good question. But because he's not going to be running with the Libertarians because there's too many disagreements there. But yeah, it's very interesting. Now, one of the things that I wanted to say is, one thing though I admit is that Bernie Sanders actually didn't have the guts to do this, because he didn't want to end up like Ralph Nader. And we know this because people like Jesse Ventura corroborated this with my comrade at RBN, Savvy Saps. So let's take a look at that. Shout out to Savvy for having this interview. This was a year ago, by the way. So let's hear.
Yeah, because when I hear centrist, I think Bill Clinton. And that's why I'm just like, I don't know. Because if you think about someone like Bernie Sanders, like a lot of the policies that he was running on were very popular.
Right. Right. Oh, I actually tell you the story. I actually went down when Bernie came to Minneapolis, me, Jesse Ventura, the ultimate independent. I've never voted for a Democrat or Republican, and I've never ran as one. I went down to meet Bernie thinking I might endorse him. Well, I got down there. I had called his people, and well, they couldn't quite get me in to see him immediately, so I had to sit around and wait a little bit. The 38th governor of Minnesota, when you're running for president, you know. And then when I did get to see him, I got a brief moment with him in the hallway as he was moving from one thing to the next. I didn't even get into the room with him, but I was able to ask him what I needed to know. And here's what I asked him. I said, Senator, if you lose to Secretary Clinton in the Democratic primary, I said, will you support, or will you run as a third party, or will you support a third party candidate if one comes along? And he looked me right in the eye and said, no, I will support Secretary Clinton. I looked at him, and Bernie was not getting my endorsement, because Bernie Sanders, I learned at that moment, was a Democrat hiding in independent clothing. He was.
So, as we see, Bernie Sanders is just a Democrat with an I next to his name. That was my Jesse Ventura. I can go further, but I'm not going to embarrass myself. But basically, that's what it is. Bernie Sanders is a Democrat with an I next to his name. Now, Here's the thing I don't think a lot of people are thinking about. Well, some people are thinking about, but I don't think some people, I think some people are willing to accept it. Some people are not willing to accept. But if you're suddenly on the RFK train because of an independent run, it's not like his policies actually changed. He's still a Zionist. Still doesn't support single-payer universal health care policy. And also he reneged on his support on qualified immunity. While he may be good on some issues, he's terrible in others, in my opinion. But I do think that anyone who wants to run should be able to run. Even Cenk Uygur. I'm sorry. Yes, Cenk Uygur is also. Oh Lord, Cenk Uygur is also running. Of course. Of course. But ultimately, this unexpected move by RFK seems dead set on running. It seemed that he was dead set on running within the Democratic primary. Because here's how RFK Jr. sounded to me running in the Democratic primary. My daddy was a Democrat. My uncle was a Democrat. My mama was a Democrat. So I'm a Democrat. Sounds kind of like the religious trope of my daddy was a Baptist, my granddaddy was a Baptist, my mama was a Baptist, so I'm a Baptist. You know, it kind of sounds like that. Sounds kind of cultish. Like, we're all Democrats. We're all Democrats, and that's how it is. But he's willing to actually move outside. I'm like, whoa, okay. So that is something that I was it was a surprise. I'll just put it that way. But there's some critiques that were given by like Brianna Joy Gray that I would like to also cover, because she put some she gives out some points that I also wanted to reflect on. So let me share my screen, because her critiques and analysis really reflects some of my critiques and analysis as well. She just says it in a more eloquent way than I ever can. So thanks, Brianna. So let me go to my starting point. Hang on, 227. Oh, we'll start there. All right.
I frankly would love it if it's had an appetite to vote for a third party candidate, whomever they are, as a rebuke to the corporate Democrats who are so out of touch with what the base wants. And I would also include within that the corporate Republicans, also vastly out of touch with what the base wants. But I just don't think that there's any realm of possibility in that happening. For one, to the extent that there is an appetite among progressives for a candidate not named Biden, RFK Jr. has betrayed, I think, a significant part of the base with respect to some of his foreign policy remarks, specifically about Israel-Palestine. And to the extent that he is very much in line with the base on both sides of the aisle when it comes to Ukraine policy, there is this question of what it means to frame yourself as an anti-imperialist candidate who wants to reduce military spending when you seem to only have that attitude toward one narrow conflict and have such a contradictory approach to Israel-Palestine, and not just Democrat-Republican Party position on Israel-Palestine, a special relationship with Israel. It's just inconsistent, and I think it makes a lot of progressives, separate and apart from their investment in the interest and well-being and civil rights of Palestinians, really question whether or not he has a holistic anti-imperialist worldview.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So that's one of the biggest gripes that some of us on the left have. His views on Israel-Palestine are terrible, which is a massive red flag for people like myself. And if you're trying to stand up for marginalized people, especially indigenous people, then the choice is easy to be on the side of the Palestinians, especially since they're experiencing illegal occupation and apartheid conditions in the region. This honestly makes me look at RFK as a corporate independent, meaning he may be running independent, but he's still corporate. So what really is the difference between him and a duopoly? He still wants to operate in a system that keeps oppressive forces in place, but he just wants them to treat people nicer. Nah, but it don't work that way. Be sure to take that poll. There's another point that I wanted to go over. Let me see. And let me go. Let's start there. Let's continue here.
I think that's right. I will say, generally speaking, I would have loved an announcement like this coming from someone like Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
I do think a lot of people at the end of his 2016 and 2020 campaigns hoped that he would demonstrate his willingness to really confront the establishment, the bipartisan corporate establishment, head on by running third party, because that is the ultimate move that says, if this isn't about this issue or that issue, this is about the idea that our political system is inherently captured and that both parties spend so many dollars fighting ballot initiatives that would enable us to have ranked choice voting or to get rid of first past the post voting and really open up our political system to a party that actually listens to what voters want. I always bring up this 2014 Princeton study that shows that there's basically zero relationship between those things that poll well with the public and what Congress actually focuses on. And I think that we see that in the very quick vote that they got on how to dress in Congress while child poverty doubles, right? 88% of Democrats, 49% of Republicans support something like Medicare for all, and neither party does. And I think when you follow the corporate dollars, you can see why. But is going to be willing to challenge power the way it takes to run as a third party? And I think that fundamental inconsistency is something that he's going to have to continue to wrestle with.
Yeah.
That part right there. Point made. If you can't stand up to the Israel lobby and corporations, then what good is an independent run? You're a Democrat or a Republican with an I next to your name. You're not actually about wrestling power from the corporate establishment. You just really, really, really want to be their lapdog. It's not a good look, at least not to me. Sorry, guys. Internet went out for a second. But if he seriously is willing to take corporate money, as well as obey and bend the knee to the Israel lobby, does an independent one really matter? Doesn't seem like it to me. You know? It's like, yeah, he's putting in more effort to run for president, to weave through and bypass the Democratic primary, but is he still worth it? Ultimately, we need more people running outside of the duopoly. That is true. if not more, to show how deeply ineffective the two-party system is, in that we ultimately need to really outlaw all parties altogether. We need to focus on policy rather than political affiliation. I see running as an independent as a net positive, but we also must be wary of the policies that these individuals as our top priority. I encourage more independent runs, but just remember that all independents are not created equal. Now, we got to take a look at those poll results, because I am very curious as to what you guys think. Let's go to this. Dear Lord. All right. So let's go to this. All right. So leave a like as well. Let me. All right. So poll. Let's. All right. This is going to be interesting, baby. All right. So in the poll, I asked, which party do you think RFK Jr. independent run will harm more? 17% of you out of 54 votes, 17% of you said Democrats, 4% of you said Republicans, 33 said both equally, and then 46% said neither. So most of you, a plurality of you, actually think that neither party will actually be harmed by an independent run by RFK. This is interesting. It's kind of almost split between both equally or neither. I find this interesting because I'm in the both equally camp in a way. But at the same time, you have some people that wouldn't vote for either party anyway. So they're just going to go with RFK or nobody at all. Just like, for instance, there's a lot of people who will go third party or nobody at all. It's kind of interesting, though. And you know what? Here's the crazy part. I could actually be moved to the neither camp. I can actually see somebody convincing me to say, well, it's actually going to be neither. Saying that he will harm both parties is not a hill I'm willing to die on. I'll just put it that way, right? You know, I'm just like, he could just do neither. You know, I could easily be convinced of that, probably. I'm not a hard ass on that. But yeah, so I'm going to go to the chat and get some of you guys' thoughts. On here. First, we're going to start off with The Rock, because I want to make sure that I get The Rock fin, because I do not want to miss out on The Rock fin. Why? Because I've had too many experiences where I missed out on The Rock fin. All right, kids. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin. Roger, he says, let's be real. These clowns aren't afraid Trump will win. They're afraid West will. Oh, Lord. Okay, bars, Roger, bars. Now apply that to every race. The more parties there are in a presidential general, the threshold of electoral college votes needed to win. With 3, you need 180. 583 divided by 3 is 179. With 4, you need 135. That's 538 divided by 4, which is 134 and a half. Yes, 270 was needed in 1980, 1992, 1996, 2000, 2012, 2016, 2020. Why, you ask? Because none or them thirds got any electoral college votes, virtually not a race. The purpose of independent is to force voters to educate themselves to the candidate, seeing that there is not an automatic assumption that they fall into along a party line because they're not in a party. So Voters must do their research to find out. That is why it's important to abolish all political parties to establish a more informed electorate. I was just telling Larry this before your show. You make a good case, Roger. You make a damn good case, man. Man. You know, like, while I also support third parties and independent runs, like, I think, like, look, my critiques of RFK Jr. aside, I do think that is actually more beneficial that he run third party, because I think that it increases more eyes on third parties as well as independents. But at the same time, if this leads us to get to a point where we can abolish all political parties so that everybody has to look at each candidate on a case-by-case basis regarding their policy positions, I think that's a good thing. Because ultimately, I think we need to abolish political parties for the most part and just not have them. But I think the vehicle to that is by using third parties and independents to get there. Does that make any sense to you? Like, that's what I'm thinking. All right, so let's go to the rest of the Chizats. Oh gosh, I'm showing my age. Chizat. JB, stop it. All right, let's see. A non-user. Damn, coming in hot. A non-user says Bernie was fast. We all know now. Damn. Oh my goodness. Mizu, you guys are funny. Mizu says, I was so disappointed with Jesse and Kim throwing it with Yang's forward bit. Yeah, that was forward party and Yang. Yikes. Oh my goodness. J.H. Scott 6 says, Chank, LOL. Chank. Oh Lord. He wasn't even born here. He can't run for president. Oh my goodness. Mizu says, JB, my big problem about West is that he doesn't take body autonomy seriously. I don't know, man. Like, West, as far as the pandemic is concerned, some people, it's not good to him. I'm sorry. It's not as an existential issue to him as it is to some. And really, and it's like I said in my video critiquing of him and Jimmy Dore. The issue is, for him, the existential thing is, as a black man, is white supremacy and the issue regarding that. Now, people will say that, well, the pandemic affected people who are poor, disabled, black, and brown people more disproportionately than it affected white people. So that should be the existential issue. But why in the world does it affect black and brown people more than white people? Why does it do that in the first place? I'm dreaming of white privilege and everything that it comes with. So yeah, that's why it affected us disproportionately. So it's kind of, in my view, just a tier above. But some people aren't going to agree with that. And I think that's where we agree to disagree. So yeah. What you talk about, Worry? Yang's got out a new book. Oh Lord, everybody writing the book. Everybody writing the book. All right. We need critical thinking, says RFK Jr. is a corporate war economy Zionist. Interesting. Soul Construct said neither. Oh, so you think neither? Okay. All right. Jay the Informant, good to see you. Soul Construct says he will back the DNC after he drops out. So oh, wait. What are you saying, Soul? So do you think that he's going to run independent, but he's going to drop out and still back the DNC candidate? Is that what you'd say? That would be an interesting variable. Because it feels like he's making it sound like I'm going all the way to the end no matter what. But will he? That's an interesting conversation. Hang on. Bluebird 123 says, someone asked Chink, so when you are elected president, will the first law you'll change be that you'll have to be born in the USA in order to become president? That would actually be, yeah. We heard that line before as Sanders. Interesting. Julie says because it affects the working class and poor more. West is not poor. Class divide. Of course, but at the same time, there is also the intersection of race and class as well, that a lot of people, unfortunately, there's a lot of people that seem to, in some sense, wave away and say, well, that's just identity politics, when in reality, it's actually class and race actually coming together. So, but yeah. Bryce says, we'll see if he makes that shift to going back to the Dems. Not sure if I heard that happen before. Yeah, that's a good question. And Wadi says, just consult Dr. Shiva. He's got it all figured out on the front, on that front. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I gotta listen to Dr. Shiva's explanation again. He actually talked to Savvy Sabs. I have to get Dr. Shiva on as well to ask him about this, because I don't know, because I know what the law says, and but we'll see. But things can change, but I don't know, man. It's just it's wild that he made the switch. And yeah, but I'm not above saying that I'm wrong, so I'm not going to pretend like I'm right on everything, because I can be wrong, so yeah. Soul Construct says Peter Dow is sinking West Run for sure. Here's my thing. Am I concerned about Peter Dow? I do have a concern, but ultimately for me, it's about the policies more than anything. So for people like Claudia de la Cruz, I think her name is Jasmine Sullivan, and then Dr. Cornel West, their policies are more in line with what I think. So yes, Peter Dow is a concern, but at the same time, I'm focused more on the policies, and it is not missed upon me that my focus is more on, because my focus is more on the policies, I'm using that as a conversation tool to build class consciousness so that people do more on the ground than focusing their energy on political heroes. So when it comes to people like Peter Dow, it's a concern, but it's not the end-all be-all concern for me, right? So as far as my support, people like Sullivan, De La Cruz, and West, I'm still in support of the policies that they uphold. See what I mean? Because when I look at people like Biden, Trump, all the people in the Republican primary, people like RFK Jr., I'm looking at their policies and I say, no. I'm not looking at their campaign managers. I'm looking at the policies. See what I mean? Because the policies are what I look at the most. Now, could he make it more difficult for the campaign? Makes it seem more questionable? Yes. However, how many people are that politically astute and are focused on the campaign managers on the ground? They're not really looking at Peter Dowell. Like, go out the street, you ask people who Peter Dowell is, they're not going to know who the hell he is. But black people especially are going to know, oh yeah, I know Dr. Cornel West though. But then if you start talking about the policies, they're going to be like, oh, I'm on board, I'm not on board, blah, 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 right? So ultimately, are they really going to care about Peter Dowell? That's not really going to have a bearing. But the policies are going to have more of a bearing on what they think regarding Dr. Cornel West. So what I mean? Like, how many people were focused on Jeff Weaver when Bernie Sanders was running? Those of us who are politically astute, those of us who are more of our ears to the ground as far as politics are concerned, we know who Jeff Weaver was. But most people who were supporting Bernie did not know who the hell he was. They didn't even know who the guy looked like. So that's my point, right? Let me see. Bluebird says, so could Peter Dowell just be a Dem insider that might report Cornell's campaign strategies back to the Democratic Party? I mean, it's possible. But at the same time, it could be the other way around. It could be that he is sincere. You don't know until these things actually come to fruition on the ground. So while I say, you know, give Peter Dowell the side eye and be very critical of all the moves that he makes, at the same time, ultimately, there is always going to be an infiltrator within any type of movement that is actually for workers. Could it be Peter Dowell? Maybe, may not be, right? So, you know, I'm just saying my focus is on the policies, and I'm not going to just take up a candidate and just leave them based on a staffing issue that is based on somebody that used to be a Democrat, but now they are going third party. Because believe it or not, most, if not almost everybody in third parties used to be Democrats, including in the De La Cruz campaign and probably in Jasmine Sullivan's. So I used to be a Democrat. You know what I'm saying? Is that the metric that we're going to die on? You know, oh, they used to be Democrats. All of you, most of you used to be too. It's just, was he a one that was very full-throated in trying to fight for the Democratic Party at the time? Yeah, unfortunately. But at the same time, I don't know, man. It feels like I'm just going to sit back and watch. That's how it feels. But I'm not going to also take my support away from these policies and then go in a completely different direction just because of somebody who is the now new campaign manager and say, well, this is what he might do. I'm going to stick with the policies, man. So, yeah. So, yes. Now, as far as, before I forget. So, if any of you are going to be in Orlando this weekend, I'm just letting you guys know. Okay, Roger, I got you. Let me make this make sure this is done. So if you guys are aware, there we have the Revolutionary Blackout Network Orlando Mutual Aid Chapter. So this weekend, we're going to be meeting again at the Drunken Monkey coffee bar. So if you guys want to, we're going to be doing another meet and greet, and also be talking about different strategies and helping out our community. So we're going to be going into the coffee bar to discuss and meet at 4 p.m. this Saturday. So if you guys are interested in joining the chapter and doing some work with us, that's what we'll be doing. Actually, let me share the tweet because I want to make sure that I get this done. So it's going to be at 444 North Bumby Avenue in Orlando, Florida. Let me share the tweet so you guys are aware. So a lot of people were like, JB, I didn't know you guys were going to be doing this. So yes. So we'll be having the second RBN Orlando chapter meet and greet this Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at the Drunken Monkey Coffee Bar at 444. So I'm going to be sharing the address in the chat just in case anybody is curious and they're like, well, JB, I want to know, how to get there. So here you go. All right. So if you'd like to volunteer out with Mutual Aid in Orlando, show up. The more the merrier. Let's help each other. All right. So make sure 4 o'clock. All right. This Saturday. That's Saturday. Was that the 7th, 8th? Something like that. Hold on. Make sure my calendar. Yes, the 7th. So Saturday the 7th at 4 p.m. All right. So be there or be square. And I will make sure to post this in the community section of my channel, as well as on RBN, so that you guys are aware. I'll probably just take a screenshot of this and share it. All right, let me go to The Rock, because that's Roger said that he has another Rock fan. All right, so thank you for the tip, Roger. He says, West does take body autonomy seriously because he understands single payer would have tamped down all of this craziness with the vaccines that we went through, but RFK does not support it. Interesting point. Yep, it's true. So how serious does he take our house if you got to think about it on that side of the equation? I mean, how do you go on talking about how corrupt health industry yet don't support single payer? Does that sound right? Claudia is Goldman Sachs affiliated. Yes, this also is true. She talked about it on Savvy Sabs. And in fact, I was supposed to have Claudia De La Cruz on a couple weeks back, but they canceled on me and they still have yet to reschedule. He says, tried to all lives matter reparations and not for single payer. Also, I really don't think most people know who West is. I asked my mother, she doesn't know, plus she doesn't know Kennedy was running for president. Go outside the political echo chamber, James, and speak to Black people. You'll find out. Most don't even know what Williamson and RFK running. That's also another variable. A lot of people just don't know. because they don't hear about it because they're so busy working. So yeah, that's also another thing. So there's a lot of variables, man. There's some inconsistencies with, because you have West with Peter Dow, you have the De La Cruz campaign with affiliations with Goldman Sachs, and then let me see, and then you have Jasmine Sullivan, who believes in the death penalty. So there's some things that, you know, people have to weigh in when it comes to different things. So that's some stuff, man. All right. So what's left? What's left is, by the way, going to be doing the reading of Assata Shakur's autobiography later this week because I need to get back into that and I got to finish. Also, I got to get some suggestions for different Black female revolutionaries as well, because I really want to read more books by them as well to highlight their thoughts. Also, going to be continuing the reading of Laziness Does Not Exist by Dr. Devon Price, because I want to finish this book and it's so good. But yes, just want to thank you guys for tuning in today as well. And thank you so very much to all the patrons on Patreon, as well as on Coffee. Thank you to all the members for all the memberships. Thank you for anybody who sends me any type of mutual aid through PayPal. Thank you so very much for that. And thank you to the new patrons as well. And also, thank you so very much to all the people who are looking out to join the RBN chapter, so here in Orlando. So thank you so very much for that. Look, like I always say, water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found them. Smoke them if you got them, drink them if you got them. If you got them, watch something funny, and because joy is revolutionary. Also, by the way, have that difficult conversation with your family members, especially when it comes to burial, because the thing is that you don't want your family members to be exploited, and you don't want to be exploited as well. Talk about this issue. You know, sit down over lunch, have this issue, get a power of attorney, talk to your families so that they are not stuck with this issue, wondering what your wishes are, so that you can say screw you to the capitalist system right when you go. Make it count, baby. Also, Representative Frost, come on, dude. Get it together. By the way, can I really expect you to get it together when you basically threw Palestinians under the bus and you said you supported them during your campaign, and then right when you went to the general, you actually threw them under the bus and then switch your allegiance to the Israel lobby? Yeah, I don't think that you're it either. And so, yeah. And by the way, I live in your district, and by the looks of the district that I live in, you're not really doing much for us either. And you're only famous because you're Gen Z. That's the only really thing that people actually embrace about you, is your age. But in reality, you're just like all the others. And RK, I was wrong. But you're still a Zionist, so. So anyway, look, forehead kisses to every single one of you guys. Keep your eyes on the policies and expand class consciousness, because that's ultimately what's going to save us. We are going to ultimately save us. And don't forget, if you're in Orlando and want to volunteer, be sure to be there at the Drunken Coffee Bar at 4 o'clock this Saturday. Love you much. Take care. I'm going to give you a second one. Forehead kisses to every single one of